Classroom Redesign, a central technological trend in higher education. Collaborative literature review by Angelica Manuel, Brittany Norris, and Frankie Jackson. This presentation is a collaborative review that discusses an overarching theme found in the literature pertaining to technology use in higher education. Specifically, a review of articles about the integration of technology in colleges and universities across the globe suggests that educators and researchers are interested in potentially harnessing technology and redesigning the way that we view schools and classrooms. All of this in the hopes of improving instructional efficacy through more student-centered learning. Our presentation is divided into 3 parts. Part 1, which will be presented by Frankie Jackson, gives a brief critical review of the literature and discusses the scope of this topic. Relating to the scope is Part 2, which will be presented by Angelica Manuel. This section deals with the relevancy of our topic and focuses on explaining the conceptual framework for our project. The third and final part will be presented by Brittany Norris. This third part critiques the literature used and also gives an analytical overview of problems and gaps in the literature. Part 1. Critical review of the literature and breadth of the topic. In her summative analysis of trends, challenges, and educational technology use in higher education, Diane Skiba projects that one of the mid to long-term trends in higher education will be the increasing presence and integration of technology in the classroom. This educated guess is supported and echoed throughout the works reviewed, as many research studies have specifically aimed to assess the impact on student learning, engagement, and motivation that a more technically integrated classroom will have on academia in the near and distant future. Overall, the material reviewed on this topic suggests that educators and students are optimistic about the outcomes of such a redesign because, after all, if technology can benefit people in their daily lives, it seems logical that its implementation in an educational context will have similar results. As was the case with a study on the use of audience response system technology or ASR technology, students do in fact achieve better results from quote-unquote pressing a button, which may be due to the optimism expressed by educators and students alike, at least in that particular study. Much of the research on this topic also points to the trajectory that this change from traditional face-to-face and brick-and-mortar educational settings will take in the higher educational arena. Specifically, some research suggests that technological redesign will involve such technologies as interactive whiteboards, IWB, which can be, and currently is, added to a face-to-face educator's arsenal of classroom tools and contributes to the creation of what can be termed a smart, or at least a smarter classroom. Another possible outcome of redesign is the transition from all learning occurring in a physical classroom setting to a more hybridized learning setup in which students do some of their coursework in some type of online setting. Finally, at the other end of the classroom redesign spectrum is the transition to a fully online educational delivery system. Just as in the previously described transition from face-to-face classrooms to smart classrooms to online classrooms, the types of technologies are also handled in a similar way. That is, from technologies that lend themselves better to in-person interactions to those that are geared towards more virtual interactions. Therefore, much of the research deals with more on-the-go educational delivery methods versus the more stationary strategies that were used in the past. This relates directly to the next big research trend, which is Web 2.0. No discussion of classroom redesign with the use of technology is complete without mention of Web 2.0, as it is repeatedly referenced in the research. For example, Vertanen and Rossi discuss how even in more traditional face-to-face classrooms, students can collaborate and share ideas even when they are outside of the physical classroom. In a similar line of study, Premadasa, Salinda, and Migama explore the ways in which short messaging services, or SMS, or what is commonly known as texting, may be used to positively impact student learning by fostering continual subject matter discourse while students are still engaged in their daily lives and activities. With all of the moving parts involved in redesigning a classroom, it is no surprise that some studies point to some potential obstacles or issues that need to be taken into account. For example, a 2017 study of a random sample of graduate students surveyed in Jordan aimed to explore whether there are gender, age, or any other group membership related factors that would keep students in Jordan from successfully using smartphones in their learning. The study found no statistically significant differences among the group's answers to the survey, which suggests that at least in this particular context, students from various backgrounds may benefit from smartphone use. Two other studies referenced point to similar considerations for cultural and economic differences across the world. Namely, in designing classrooms and pursuing the bigger, better mousetrap, so to speak, those countries that are part of what's called the developed world would have an easier time implementing these technologies than those in the developing world. So for best results, different models of technology integration may need to be used in those different regions. The diagram shown here illustrates the ADDIE model, or ADDIE model, which is directly related to the most important recommendation of all of the literature reviewed. As a specific example, in an article about the redesign of a small advanced level chemistry course, the researchers explained that because they chose the appropriate technology based on pedagogical recommendations, they were successfully able to redesign the course to help further student learning. Ultimately, this is the underlying theme throughout all of the studies reviewed. That is, the body of research suggests that educators should not lose sight of the primary aim of education, which is student learning. Therefore, new technologies should only be used so long as they help further those aims. Part 2, Relevancy of the Topic and Conceptual Framework.
Big ideas involving classroom redesign through technology use are learning spaces, web-based learning, and active learning. Let's take a look at learning spaces. Multimedia labs or digital labs, learning labs, are flexible spaces for interdisciplinary conversation. Effective teaching and learning takes place with multimedia tools and workflows. Next, web-based learning is when teachers explore the use of formal education using the internet. This benefits teachers and students when learning tasks align with technology and educational practices. Finally, active learning refers to the range of activities that promote students' effort to construct knowledge. There are also buzzwords associated with classroom redesign repeatedly in the literature. The key terms are interactive technology, which refers to whiteboards and audience response systems. Instructional practice, or multiple ways for expressing content. And finally, student performance, how well students comprehend and apply knowledge. Relevancy of topics. Classroom redesign in higher education is common in today's society. It improves the spacing, flexibility, and delivery of instruction. It provides a feasible teaching and learning environment by utilizing different modes of learning. Technology streamlines instructional frameworks through Web 2.0. Web-based learning has created multiple ways for people to access enriched and effective practices. Technology development can create a false sense of understanding. It can interfere with student processing, interrupt instructional hours, and create financial concerns. Complete online classes can take away from the foundation of teaching and learning. If professors are not properly educated on the appropriate use of technology, it can diminish educational advancement. But if instructional practices are carefully implemented, it will create a varied learning approach. Learners will greatly benefit from the use of technology as a productivity tool. It will prepare them to become future specialists in a digital enhanced world, provide field-related training and preparation, apply real-world application to course-related studies, and encourage and promote effective communication among different races and cultures. Now we're moving into the conceptual framework breakdown. Web 2.0 can be used socially or contextually. Socially, users engage with people and media content in different ways. It also allows for the creation and exchange of user-generated content. This basically means content can be credible or not depending on the creator. In a contextual way, flexible learning can take place across various places. This includes classrooms, off campus, within the workplace, and wherever internet is accessible. Web 2.0 trends are now driving and restructuring the academic programs. Active learning can be used in various ways. Number 1, blended learning. Blended learning connects the online and face-to-face learning activities. It provides ways for students to engage and demonstrate their learning. Number 2, e-learning. E-learning creates active engagement that will be meaningful and flexible for students. It also accommodates everyone's needs through quick delivery of lessons. Problem-based learning. Problem-based learning allows students to design, develop, and share their creations in a digital format. It is also composed of many different styles, incorporates various strategies, utilizes differentiated approaches, and presents multiple outcomes. Finally, self-direct learning is a process of sorting through our experiences and understanding how they shape our views. Self-direct learning requires people to navigate, evaluate, and filter through the internet for beneficial information to increase their comprehension. Current trends towards classroom redesign by teachers and students are both positive and negative. This section is important because classrooms should be designed for how students learn and teachers teach. Let's talk about the positive views from the teachers. Classroom design makes various tools, data, and learning easy. Students are more likely to produce artifacts that are reflective of what has been taught. Professors are more accepting of the upgrades and changes to better serve their students. Now, let's take a look at some of the negative views. Academic quality is the first. Academic quality is the result of learning. How has the educational institution adequately met standards associated with every field? Next, funding models. Funding models refer to the money used to improve institutions. Finally, regulatory standards are how institutions stay in compliance with laws and policies. Finally, productivity of technology can be inconsistent. This sums up teachers' views of classroom redesign. Let's move to the student views. Students view classroom redesign in a positive way. They enjoy different modes of learning and digital formats which eliminate excessive paper usage. Now, there are some concerns as it relates to classroom redesign. Some students believe if technology is not properly installed, it could interfere with learning. They also have some concerns of privacy issues and threats within an online classroom.
Part 3. Critiques of methods and identified problems and gaps.
This section will cover critiques of methods. Studies relating to technology use in higher education can be both qualitative and quantitative in nature. However, qualitative research studies tend to be more frequent. These studies include surveys and interviews as tools that collect their data, and assessments are generally used with the quantitative research studies. The most common research themes have been related to mobile applications and systems, socio-cultural context, tools, and technologies. There has been a study where a group of researchers used a comparison design. However, this study had a weakness because the two groups could actually collaborate after class, so it could have dampened the actual validity and reliability of the data that was gathered. There's also been another interesting study where a group of researchers created scenarios and they tested them out with technology use and gathered data that way. However, this also isn't as reliable and as valid as we would like because the scenarios didn't actually happen. So that takes away from the actual importance and the actual usefulness of the information. So studies must rely on student interest and participation when it comes to the surveys and interviews, which sometimes can be affected by the student's mood or their perception of the content or even the teacher. Another unique perspective was brought in by pedagogy and interactive whiteboard technology integration in higher education institutions. Computer-based teaching scenario prototypes offered research that was based on scenarios that were made to simulate different environments or settings that the technology may be used. However, although this was a unique perspective to take, these were just scenarios. So there was no real guarantee that they would even happen. So the information from this study became less reliable and valid for teachers to use for their own research because that didn't actually take place. There was no action research involved. This section covers identified problems and gaps in the research. Research shows that even though students prefer technology, there's no real evidence that it increases student achievement. There needs to be more research on what practices or what tools or what strategies of technology use are most effective for student achievement. And in some areas it may be that the technology needs to be pulled back, in other areas it needs to be enforced. There also is another call for more research on the use of mobile devices such as cell phones in the classroom and what impact that has on student learning, or how that may increase productivity for students, especially in the college realm where many students have multiple classes and then a job. So really having that mobile atmosphere in the classroom. There also needs to be more information on what innovative practices are the best for mobile learning as well as for just general technology. Other limitations could include the fact that most participants are between the ages 21 and 25 in these studies, which doesn't always reflect the higher education students. Female participation seems to be a lot higher than male participation as well. Sometimes it could be more than 3 times the male participation. There are also various technologies used within the classroom. Some of the studies discussed tablets and desktops and cell phones, but the studies did note that the use of desktops are slowly declining, and most students are reporting that they aren't purchasing desktops anymore and are instead going with a laptop or a tablet. Various subjects and professors will impact the use of technology as well as the effectiveness of instruction, which could make student performance and satisfaction vary as well. So all of these things could influence the actual study and therefore be a limitation when it comes to the research.
This concludes our presentation on classroom redesign as a central technological trend in higher education. Thank you for watching.